And welcome everybody to another episode of Smart Money Circle. I'm your host, Adam Sarhan. Today we have Stephen Hartel from Trilogy, who helps manage $3 billion in assets under management. This is part 2 of his interview. Steve, I want to thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Adam.
So Steve, for the first part of the show, or the first episode, we had spoke about your story, how you got involved in markets, gave an overview about your investment strategy and how you handle risk and some mistakes you see people make with risk. Now I kind of want to shift gears and just talk about what are some timeless lessons you've learned over the years in this business?
Oh boy. I guess I would say you have to think long term. This is an area of your life where you need to measure success in years or decades rather than minutes or hours or even weeks. That financial behavior is not easy to change, and true success and true wealth cannot be achieved simply by putting money in an investment account. There has to be a certain amount of behavior change that goes along and supports that. I mean, it's not that different from somebody who's overweight. The temptation is to just go on a short-term diet to fix the problem and then go right back to the way you used to eat.
Yep.
And I think most people now realize that if you're severely overweight, that a diet is not what you need. What you need is a change in lifestyle.
Right.
And I just take that same philosophy and apply it to people's finances. So, there's way too many people out there who are trying to prey on people's desire for get-rich-quick schemes or shortcuts or ways to get rich without really having to work at it. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you on that. So the first lesson would be think long-term. Now,
Yeah.
Before we go to the second and third lesson, or even more lessons, I just want to take a second here to clarify some important points. So you said talk about changing behavior, especially financial behavior is very difficult. What are some of those negative patterns or bad behavior, if you will, that you see people make, and how do you change it, or how do you solve, or, rectify it, or solve it, or fix it?
Oh my goodness! So a huge one is our society has migrated to where people are worshiping at the altar of instant gratification.
Yes.
Right. I know when I go into elementary schools and teach kids about money, I will often do a thing where I'll bring a bag of Hershey's Kisses, chocolate kisses with me.
Right.
And I will hand one out to everybody, and I'll say, you now have a choice. You can eat this one kiss now, this one piece of chocolate right now if you want to. But if you hold on to it for 15 minutes until I've given you a quick lesson about money, anybody who still has their one at the end of 15 minutes, I'll give you a second one.
Right.
And invariably, 90% of the kids will just wolf it down.
Wow.
And there's only one or two kids who can hang in for 15 minutes. And when I translate that into the adult world, it's not a whole lot different, Adam. It's kind of sad, but
I fully agree. By the way, yeah.
People are always looking for the quick fix. It's hard to a huge part of my job is, I don't want to call it therapist, but it's more like financial coach.
Right.
Is to keep my clients motivated and to keep their eye on the goal. So that they'll stick with it and not get bored and not get distracted by the latest shiny object that crosses their whatever device they're looking at the moment.
Yeah, or the latest investment fad, whether it be pot stocks or whatever it is, Bitcoin,
yeah.
whatever stuff, just the fad du jour. So that's a really good point, Steve. I always laugh, and years ago when my daughter was in kindergarten, I'd observe the behavior at a lunchroom or when the kids would come over on a play date, and you'd get a bunch, maybe 15 or 20 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds in a room. And, kids at that age don't understand money, but they understand value. So, for example, if you have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and I have a chocolate chip cookie and I say, hey, Steve, do you want to make a trade? If you perceive there to be more value in the cookie than the sandwich, you'll place the trade. If not, you won't. Adults do the exact same thing, but money's involved. right? So Netflix, for example, most people have a Netflix subscription because you pay $15 a month and you get unlimited content, entertainment 24/7. Meanwhile, if you take a family of 4 to the movies, you're going to pay $50 plus, and you have to go Friday night at 8 o'clock at a time that's convenient for the movie. And if you have to go to the bathroom, you have to stop, get up, and it's not convenient. Meanwhile, you could pay $15 a month and get 24/7 movies whenever you want on demand from any device. So clearly a lot of value for a little amount of money. But I love that whole point about the Hershey Kisses and the instant gratification, because that's so true.
Yep.
So some of the timeless lessons: think long term, adjust your financial behavior, get rid of the bad financial behavior and adjust it with good financial behavior. And then, stop or get away from that altar of worshiping the instant gratification or the latest, chasing the latest shiny object. I love that.
Yes. I think I'd add one more, and
Sure.
It's somewhat repetitive to some of the things we talked about in the earlier episode. And that is that risk management is more important than individual investment selection.
Okay. And what do you mean by that, just for the audience to understand?
So having a portfolio, I mean, all the academic research in this area shows that maintaining a portfolio at a given level of risk will outperform a portfolio that that is constantly trying to hit a home run and has lots of strikeouts along the way. If I can throw baseball metaphor in there. And people so often are trying to look for a hot tip, or, as you mentioned, the latest thing that comes along. Oh my God, my next door neighbor just made $1 gazillion on Bitcoin, so I want to do Bitcoin.
Right.
And they don't even know what the hell Bitcoin is.
Right.
So, I mean, when it first came out, there were probably 5 people on the whole planet that could intelligently explain what blockchain technology is and why it makes any difference. Bitcoin was just one application of blockchain technology, and yet everybody tried to jump on this Bitcoin bandwagon, and some of them got lucky and most of them didn't. I mean, it's the same thing the way casinos, the reason they have hundreds of slot machines there is so that there's always one person who's screaming, "Oh my God, I just won $1 million."
Yeah, exactly.
And because then you don't notice the 5,000 people who are just keep plugging their dollars in and losing and losing and losing. And, it's the stock market works the same way.
Yeah, it's the same thing with any asset bubble throughout history, the tulips back in Holland or any other bubble since, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I always like to say the assets change, the people change, the centuries change, the religions, the cultures, the race, everything changes. The one thing that's constant is human nature.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I love that. So risk management is king. That's a really, really good point too. And like you said earlier about the baseball, instead of it's slow and steady wins the race, right? It's not just sprint and run out of gas and then you're toast, and it's just slow and steady. That's a really good point.
Yep.
So, Steve, what are some of classic mistakes you see people make in the market with their money that we haven't discussed so far?
Oh gosh. I guess 2 that we haven't discussed that come to mind is confusing a good company or a good idea with a good stock or a good investment.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
There are some people out there who will say, gosh, if you think Coca-Cola is a great beverage and you really believe and you look around and see that everybody is drinking Coca-Cola, and that means that would be a good stock for you to buy.
Right. And
there is a certain amount of truth to that, but it's a shallow level of correlation there, because there could be, no matter how good that Coca-Cola beverage might be, there could be things fundamentally wrong with the management of the company. And I'm not at all saying there's anything wrong with Coca-Cola. That's just a hypothetical example here. But, the CFO could be stealing money. The CEO could show up, tomorrow on a headlines of some, romantic affair scandal. I mean, there's all kinds of things that will cause the emotional part of the stock market to take over and crush you, even if the beverage is still a really good thing.
Right. You can have a really good company and a lousy stock and vice versa.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, this is a place where investing in the stock market sounds easier than it is.
Right.
And I think it's one of the reasons so many people don't seek out a professional's help is because it seems really obvious. And, people who wouldn't think twice about calling a plumber or an electrician or a dentist or a surgeon to handle some other problem seem to think that doing the stock market doesn't require a similar degree of knowledge and expertise. And sometimes that frustrates me.
Oh, that's a great point.
I mean, obviously, as a finance professional, I'm biased there, but I've seen the results of it. And I've had people come to me and have me try and fix their broken portfolio because they screwed it up themselves.
Yeah, no.
So I've just seen it happen.
It's a really good point. You wouldn't go to a doctor with a surgeon and have him, it's the first time he looks at a scalpel and be like, okay, let's go ahead and start cutting away. It wouldn't happen. You'd get up and leave.
No.
Yeah.
No. And I told my daughter once, I said, the incredibly detailed instructions for removing your own appendix can be found countless places on the internet. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea for you to do it yourself.
Correct.
Even if the instructions are correct.
Right.
It just doesn't mean it's a smart thing.
Yeah.
So
plus there's no one formula that works in the investment world where, if I ask you to give me a strategy that guarantees you're going to lose or guarantees you're going to win, it's virtually impossible. So it's the application of it, the execution of it, ... So it's a very, very good point.
Right. And then I think the second one that I'll mention about classic mistakes is the whole area of market timing.
Right.
People sometimes are really slow learners and they look at techniques that might have worked in decades gone by. And it used to be that certain people could get access to certain information before other people. And you used to be able to bob and weave and jump in and out of the market and be somewhat successful at that. And as long as you were correct most of the time and you were only wrong a handful of times, you could still come out ahead.
Right.
But in today's environment where everybody has access to everything and the successful institutional traders are the ones whose algorithms can process information milliseconds faster than their competitors. Timing the market is a dinosaur strategy that is just destined for failure. And yet I still see people thinking that they're smarter than everybody else and that they can know when to jump in and when to jump out.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And I know in the past, we spoke on the phone a while ago and you had mentioned some mistakes people make with their retirement. So some of those mistakes, I mean, it's a little bit of a different subject, but enough money is not enough. Right.
Yes.
And then not updating your plan and then not respecting risk. Can you speak a little about that when it comes to financial mistakes as well, where you see people make these mistakes over and over again and they think they know it, but they just keep making the same mistake over and over again?
Oh boy. Yeah, I guess one of the big ones is, and it seems like we keep coming back to this topic of risk.
Right.
But I'll get somebody whose portfolio will go down.
Okay.
And even though we did our best to prepare them for that eventuality, because all markets go up and they go down, that's what they do.
Right.
And the whole game is not get freaked out when it goes down. But
right.
I'll get people who, in spite of all that, will still get too freaked out and they'll want to change strategies and try and play catch up. And they'll say, well, gee, I lost 2% this year in my portfolio and I'm going to retire in only 3 years. And so I really need to make that up because, boy, I don't want to have to work any longer. I still want to be able to retire when I wanted to.
Right.
So let's jack the risk level of my portfolio up so that I can earn more this year.
Oh, wow.
And, here's somebody who couldn't handle the risk they had, and yet they're asking me to give them more risk.
2% pullback too, right? You're not the drawdown of 2% is virtually nothing.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So that's a classic one that I see.
And then what about not updating their retirement plan?
Oh, yeah. So, things change all the time. Social Security rules change. Tax rates change. I've probably had 5 or 6 people in my career walk in the door at age, 64 or 64 and a half, and they're carrying this 30-year-old 3-ring binder in their hand. And they're like, hey, 30 years ago, I was so smart, and I went to a financial planner, and I paid a lot of money, and they did this incredibly detailed financial plan for me, and it said that, if I raised exactly $982,000, I could retire. And so I've done that now. I'm at 982.01, and so I'm going to turn in my retirement papers tomorrow, and I just kind of wanted to check with somebody to see, if that still made sense.
This is funny.
And I'll blow the dust off of this 30-year-old plan,
right?
And the assumptions that it used about trying to predict 30 years into the future of what was the tax rate going to be, or how much would inflation be, or what changes would occur in the Social Security policies, and what rate of return might their investments get?
Right.
We're just horribly outdated.
Right.
And so there's a classic example. Unfortunately, I can count on one hand the number of times that's happened, at least to me personally, where somebody came in and said, well, for 30 years, I've been following this plan, and I'm here, and I'm ready. And I had to give them the sad news of, gee, no, you're not ready. Good job for following your plan.
Right.
But the plan is, written in hieroglyphics. It's so old.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the whole idea of maintenance and almost treating the plant as a living organism where it needs to be maintained, or like a plant, you've got to water it and make sure that it stays healthy and give it some light and sunshine and update it along the way is important. Or your computer, you have to update the software, whatever the analogy is.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's a really, really good piece of advice as well. So I know we're cutting short on time here. So let me ask you this question, Steve. What is the best piece of advice, or one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received or that you've given over the years?
All right. Since we're running out of time, I'm going to pick one. And that is to focus on the goal, not the dollars.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And that might be, in my case of somebody who has described for me what they want their retirement to look like. And together we have determined how much money that will take. And so, yes, they do have a number in mind, and, they're striving towards that number. And sometimes they forget, what does that number represent?
Right.
And I don't want you to be thinking about, well, I have to save up X dollars. I want you to think, the reason I need to save X dollars is because I want to be able to do and live blank, blank, and blank.
That goes back to your earlier point about the why, right? Focusing on the why first, and that ties it all together. Correct. Perfectly.
Yes.
Well, I love that. So focus on the goal, not the dollars.
Yep.
Is there anything you want to add, Steve, that I didn't ask?
Oh, gosh, no, Adam, you're an excellent interviewer. I think you covered everything.
Well, thank you kindly. I really appreciate that. So once again, Steve, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So, yeah, if you want to read some more about me, you can go to the Trilogy FS, F as in financial, S as in services.com website. There's a whole page there with my bio and information about our firm as well, and our different locations. Or you can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook. I've got good detailed profiles, both of those places. Or if you're old-fashioned like me and like to pick up the phone and actually use it as a telephone, You can reach me at 303-300-3323, and my direct extension is 5221.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. You're an excellent guest, and hopefully we'll have you back again at some point in the future.
Thanks, Adam. I would really love that. This was a lot of fun.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Steve. Have a great day. Take care.